I still think of myself as being kind of young. And I think that when you're talking about age, you said it earlier in your introduction, age is something we start at birth or in the womb, really, and we go all the way to the day we die.
Welcome to Mind, Body, Health, and Politics. I'm your host, Dr. Richard Lewis Miller. The mission of Mind, Body, Health, and Politics is to enhance your physical and emotional well-being and encourage community. And I say encourage community because I believe that human beings are basically tribal animals, and we're meant to live in tribes where we know each other, where we sustain one another, as well as financially. And particularly at this time in American history, because the economic stratification that's been going on in our country for decades now, perhaps since Nixon and Reagan, has resulted in 70% of our country are now living paycheck to paycheck. And that is not sustainable. And that is something we have to do something about. At the same time, we have a growing population of people who are considered elderly. And that's what our guest today, Maddy Dychtwald, is going to be talking about. Because Maddie and her husband, Ken, are pioneers in studying what we call the aging population. But that's a misnomer, because everybody is aging from the time you're born. They are studying people who have been aging for quite a while and are now in later years, perhaps past 60, 70, and 80. And that's what we're going to be hearing about. So welcome to Mind, Body, Health, and Politics, Maddie.
Thank you, Richard. It is such a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you. Maddie, you heard in the introduction, I'm correct, aren't I, that what we call seniors are a growing population in this country? That I'm not a one-off at my age?
No, you are definitely not a one-off, but we're moving away, or we at Age Wave are moving away from using the term senior or golden oldies. We think of them as being sort of old school in a way that's almost kind of negative. I mean, people don't feel so great about that. Instead, we really talk about it in terms of older adults. And I think that we're seeing some unique demographic trends or population shifts that we've never seen before. Keep in mind that in the United States, the way population segments usually have grown in the past is the youth population is where the growth has been. But today, it's like kind of been a flip-flop. Now we're seeing the biggest growth in the population taking place with the oldest segments of the population. In fact, your segment, the 80 plus population, that's the fastest growing age segment in the United States today, right here and right now.
Interesting. An example of that is you have given talks all over the world for decades, and you've been interviewed by people all over the world for decades. Have you ever been interviewed by an 85-year-old before?
I don't know. Well, I'm 74 myself, so
I can't remember that far back. Oh, 74. Oh, yes. Yeah, I guess I remember that.
Yeah, it's pretty young. I mean, I still think of myself as being kind of young. I mean, I think that, when you're talking about age, you said it earlier in your introduction, age is something we start at birth or in the womb, really, and we go all the way to the day we die. So aging is a lifelong process, but there's 3 different kinds of aging. First, there's that chronological aging, which is, you just referred to it. You're 80 years old, okay?
85. Don't make me less than I am.
Sorry, okay. Well, what are you going to say? You look 80, but you're 85. Chronological aging is the number of birthdays you have. So that just tells you how many years you've been on this planet. But second is the physiologic or biologic aging. That's how our bodies are aging. And that's something that we would like to delay or prevent the cascade of poor health from happening if poor health is going to happen. So yeah, that's physical. But then there's the positive side of aging, which I bet you're experiencing, and that is the psychological or emotional aging. And that's when we gain so much from living a long life, from our experience. Some of us, hopefully, have gained some wisdom through our experience. And studies show that we've gained resilience. In fact, they say that the older population is the most resilient segment of the population because we've gone through bad times before. I mean, we've seen the economy go up and down. We've seen politics go crazy before. We know there's another side to this. We're going to get there. So we can take a deep breath and relax a little bit more than younger people who are definitely experiencing some emotional turmoil and all the craziness going on in the world today. So those are the three kinds of aging.
The part of the three that is of particular interest to me is the physiological aging.
Yes.
Because the chronological aging, I can't do anything about. Every day that goes by, I'm a day older.
That's right.
And the maturity and the wisdom is something that I can do something about, and I have various skills for doing that.
Good.
The physiological aging I want to talk to you about, because that to me is something that if we are taught is going to happen, we can take steps to at least ameliorate or to deal with it. For example, I have been taught by some of my scientific colleagues that at age 50, we start to lose a certain percentage of muscle mass every year, whether we like it or not. Have you seen that research, and do you have an opinion on it?
I have an opinion based on science. First, let me put it into context, if you will. Yeah, I agree with you. The physiologic aging, you want to prevent or delay that cascade of bad health as quickly and as much as you can. So you focused in on one little thing, which happens as we get older, but you said it doesn't happen until 50. It's not true. We start to lose muscle mass as early as our late 30s and early 40s. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real thing. And so strengthening, muscle strengthening, getting out those stretch bands, picking up those weights a couple, 3, 4 times a week, it's a really good move. In fact, according to a study, literally came out just in the last few months from the Annals of Medicine, they say that they believe that muscle strength should be a new vital sign similar to our heart rate or even our blood pressure. So that's how important it is.
Well, if it's the decline or the decrease in muscle mass begins, as you say, perhaps in the late 30s or 40s, not at 50 as I thought. What that means is if we start losing at 40, by the time we're 70, if we lose 1% a year and we haven't done anything to prevent it, we could lose 30% of our muscle mass.
That's right.
And to me, that's why I've been thinking that a lot of people who are 6, 70, and 80 who look very old are doing so because they've lost so much muscle mass that they're unable to sustain their skeletal system and they're bent over and they're having a hard time walking, not because, quote, they're old, but because their muscles have declined.
And their muscles have declined in part because they're living longer. So, I mean, but you alluded to it, you can take steps starting as early as in your 30s and 40s. I mean, my daughter is 37, my son is 34. I told them about this idea that muscle mass should be a new vital sign, and they're like, oh my God, I'm starting today. And sure enough, they're in the gym doing strengthening exercises at least 3 times a week. So yeah, it makes a huge difference, not just in your muscles, but as you suggested, in our skeletal system. And, people fall and break a hip. I mean, that could be because you don't have enough muscle mass. I mean, it affects your balance as well as everything else. So an easy step to take. I mean, it's not the only kind of fitness activity that you should take part in, but definitely one of the ones that you should really zero in on.
Yeah, I started focusing on this physical aspect, fortunately, when I was in my early 40s. Before that, my exercise came probably from turning pages in books and maybe active sexual activity. But other than that, not very much. But in my 40s, I got into it. And now recently in my 80s, I've upped my game. So now
Awesome.
I lift weights 4 hours, 4 times a week, and I do aerobics 6 or 7 times a week. It's a lot of investment, but it's necessary. If that's what it takes, that's what it takes. You have to put in the time. The options don't look very good. I
No,
don't
they
want to
do
be
not. They do.
no.
But you used the right word. It's an investment. I mean, what we, each and every one of us, no matter how old we are, we've got to invest in our future self as well as in our present. And, you can combine some of your exercise activities, but, you definitely need to do the cardio. You definitely need to do the muscle strengthening, but you also need to look at you kind of talked about it a little earlier, your posture and your balance, and even your relaxation is part of your exercise regimen that you need to take seriously. I mean, I know that every night before I go to sleep, I do a series of breathing exercises that really make a difference. They help me sleep.
Well, you're 72, you mentioned, and you
Now,
look fantastic.
74.
Oh, I dropped you a couple of years. Well, so you look terrific. You look like you're really walking the walk, and so am I. And it's a lot of effort. But I'm also a very practical person, Maddie. I want to know what works, and people listening to us, they may be going to work at 9 o'clock and working till 5. That means
Right,
they have to get up at 7 or 7:30, or how we don't know how long it takes to commute to work. And
right.
then after work, they come home and then they have dinner and a little time with the family. And they're listening to us and they're saying, what are they talking about? When am I going to find time to do aerobics and to do weightlifting and to do these things when my life is so packed with just making a living and supporting my
Yeah.
family and so on? So what I've been working on, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, is how to build exercise into daily life. For example, I go to the Verizon store for my phone, which you get online there. You could wait for the rest of your life. So while I'm online, I start doing squats. And then when I go to Safeway, I'm online for food. I start doing squats. I figured out that if I build squats into my daily routines of errands, at the end of the year, I've done 49,126 squats.
Wow.
Well, really, that's without taking off time from work. And I'm wondering, I'm sort of playing with the idea of maybe we should be encouraging people to build some kind of exercises into their daily lives so they don't have to go to classes and they don't have to take time off work. They can sort of fold it in. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, what you're suggesting has a name for it. It's, first of all, we think of it, it's movement, not just exercise, but movement. You want to build as much movement into your everyday life as possible. Then there's something called NEAT. So it's non-exercise activity thermogenics. That's a fancy way of saying everything except eating, sleeping, and actual exercise. And there's a lot of that we do in our regular life that, in fact, even a little different than what you do, because what you do is taking it to the next level, I think. But, going to the grocery store and walking around the aisles takes a certain amount of energy and burns a certain amount of calories. Washing the dishes, all those chores that are kind of like that hot potato that we try to pass on to somebody else in our family. Those are things that can actually translate into burning calories, burning energy, feeling more energetic and vital. Now, I don't think they replace the idea of exercise, but they certainly are something that enhances your life and can burn up to 2,000 calories a day. It's pretty amazing.
It is. Here's your book. Let's see if we can get it on. Okay, everybody. Tell me some. We're talking about exercise because it's so important. Because if we lose muscle strength, we're in big trouble. What are some of the other things that you're recommending to women in your book, Ageless Aging, a woman's guide to increasing health span, brain span, and lifespan?
Yeah. Well, first, let me put this into the point of view that why did I even write this book?
Yeah.
So there's two
Why did you
reasons.
write this book?
Okay, there were two real reasons that I wrote this book. One is, three maybe. I'm passionate about the subject. Not only am I facing my own aging, but I've been on this beat of aging, longevity, and retirement for close to 40 years. And along the way, I've learned a lot. We've done a lot of deep research at AgeWave, which I co-founded. We're basically a think tank, but I've also had the great opportunity to talk to the top experts, academicians, researchers, scientists, and get their perspective on these things. And there's two things that I really started to see. One, there's really very few books that are focused specifically on women and longevity. Sure, there's a lot of books that are general, but honestly, women and men are really different in a variety of ways, beginning with the fact that women live longer than men, about 5 to 6 years longer than men. So
You
that
deserve it.
oh,
You do.
oh,
We give
thank you.
we do such terrible things to women historically and presently. You deserve to live a little longer, to have a little peace.
Okay, well, we don't necessarily have peace, but let's start there. Second, most people who do write books on longevity are very zeroed in on one or two of the ingredients that go into what I think of as ageless aging. Uh, they'll talk about your food or your exercise the way you just did, or they talk about sleep and so on. But after talking to all these experts, what I realized was it's not just about one or two things. There's like a holistic recipe that includes a variety, a bouquet, if you will, of different ingredients. And what's super cool is these ingredients, they don't exist in silos by themselves. They interact with each other. And to me, that's the power of the holistic recipe. So just as an example, we talked about exercise. So if you're exercising on a regular basis, chances are you're going to sleep better. And if you improve your sleep, by the way, sleep is when your brain has the opportunity to clean out the toxins, and you definitely want those toxins out of your body. If you're sleeping better, then you're going to have more energy and vitality for exercise, but also for investing in your social life and your social connections, which more and more we're beginning to see the importance through science of social connections to living longer and living better. And then if you have these strong social connections, they give you a sense of purpose, and adding purpose and meaning to your life definitely can translate into better brain health and better physical health. So you can see how all these things actually work together. And I include, and I think that you kind of suggested it in your introduction a little bit, I think that financial well-being is an important part of this holistic recipe, because if you don't have your financial house in order, it's going to create some chronic stress. And that
Definitely.
chronic stress is so bad for you. It raises your cortisol levels. It creates inflammation. The inflammation manifests as diseases like diabetes or heart disease. And then you need to access the healthcare system and don't even have the dollars to do so. So it's
I'm very glad. I'm very, very glad that you're including financial health as part of health, Maddie, because very few people do. And the problem is, so often the people who write about it don't have the problems that we're talking about. But that's 70% of the country who are
that's
living
right.
to paycheck. They are living with the sword of Damocles over their neck. And if
Well,
they lose a paycheck, they're liable to be out in the street with their children. And that is causing a lot of ill health. And that's what you're telling us.
That's right.
And
That's
that needs
exactly
to be
right.
it needs to be addressed, and it needs to be focused on. Okay, let's
Absolutely. And you know
yeah.
what? We make it so hard. And uh, I think this whole idea of understanding financial terminology, they use all these acronyms and, it's all about bulls and bears. I mean, we need to be able to cut through that and help women and men better understand the language of finance so that they can gain the confidence to start making small investments into their future self, because it's so vitally important.
There really is a tomorrow very often, as
Let's
much as
hope.
we want, as well, as much as so many of us, including myself, were trained about the imperative of living in the moment, of being present in the here and now, with
Yes.
the realization that the future may or may not come. But at the same time, as you're pointing out, we do need to plan for the future when it comes to finance. And the things we're talking about regard to exercise, they do have benefits today, but they're also an investment in the future.
No doubt about it. What you're saying, you're speaking to the choir here.
Yeah. Well, we're on the same page. I want to ask you now, getting back to women, do you have recommendations with regard to hydration for women who are older?
Yeah, yes, I do. Let me just back up for 1 minute and say, yeah, it's great. We women, we have an advantage of a longevity bonus, an extra 5 to 6 years of life, more than men, but which is great in so many ways. I mean, gives us the opportunity to spend time with family and friends, to travel if that's what we choose to do, to potentially reinvent ourselves or have a second career, whatever, it gives us opportunity. It also creates some challenges, and finances being one of them. Health,
Yes.
being another one, because what we know is, while women live longer than men, there is a dark side to the story. And that is that when it comes to health span, the number of healthy years that we live, women, even when you correct for the fact that we live longer than men, we spend more time in a cascade of poor health than men do, 12 to 14 years. And that's not good news. So that's why I wrote this book, really, if it comes down to it, to give women some tools, some action steps, many of which are either low cost or no cost, that they can put into place right here and now so that they can have some agency over their health and well-being.
Of all the things that contribute to healthy aging for women, what percentage is taken up by what women eat? Nutrition. Who said
That's
that?
my
Who?
dog.
I heard that. What's your dog's name?
My dog's name is Joy.
A boy, a girl. Is she going to come over and say hello?
No, I don't think so, but that's
What
okay.
kind? Okay,
She's a
what kind of?
rescue. She's a tripod, and she's adorable and loving, and I am the apple of her eye.
And she lost a leg.
She did. She was found wandering the streets of Bakersfield with an injury, and before she even came to our family, she became a tripod. But you know what? She
Oh,
doesn't even realize that she is
that's right.
missing a leg. I mean, she's
Right.
supposed to run and jump and play, and she's in a hiking group every morning. So she's doing great. She's really
Good.
happy. She is
Okay.
adjusted to her disability.
Let's talk nutrition for
Okay.
women.
So yeah, it's important. Let's not, I don't know about percentage wise, but it's not just what you eat, which is incredibly important, and what you don't eat, which is also important. It's when you eat that really matters as well. And there's been a lot of emphasis on this recently with this whole idea of intermittent fasting. But yeah,
That makes me laugh every time I hear it. I've been intermittent fasting all my life. It's called sleeping at night.
yeah. Okay. So you actually are onto it, Richard. So I'm way impressed. I got a chance to talk to Dr. Walter Longo, who came up with the whole concept of intermittent fasting. And he's like, oh my God, it's been so misunderstood. You know, these hackers, these biohackers at the cutting edge, they're doing things like going 16 to 18 hours without eating. That's actually bad for your health. It's all about, as you sort of said, it's about going 12 or 13 hours the most without eating. So eat your dinner, wait at least 3 hours before you go to sleep. And let's say you stop eating at 8 o'clock at night. Don't eat breakfast until after 8 o'clock the next morning. And yeah, lots of us. I mean, I know I do it every day, have for years. So it's
Exactly.
pretty easy. He also said, which I found interesting, was that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. So I thought that was pretty funny. My grandmother used to tell me that too.
Yeah, my grandmother said the same thing. And my grandmother also focused on protein in the morning instead of carbohydrates.
Oh, your grandmother was super smart, because as we get older, that's one of the big shifts, especially for women who need more protein than men. So yeah, we need to have protein the first thing in the morning.
So, what does Maddy Dychtwald typically have for breakfast?
I knew you were going to ask me that. I have a breakfast challenge. I don't like eating breakfast. It takes too long to get it together, for one thing, and I'm usually really busy in the morning. So lately, what I've been doing is I've been having some eggs with, believe it or not, with fermented food to go along with it, with sauerkraut generally, which tastes, I know it sounds horrible, but it tastes really great. And I add some either chopped vegetables of some sort into my eggs. And, you know, it tastes really good. And I have, I don't partake of gluten, so I use a nut seed bread as well, and I love it. And I add a little olive oil onto it instead of butter, and it tastes, I use actually extra virgin olive oil that's infused with lemon. Doesn't that sound amazing? It is amazing. And it just tastes so good. So, and I have coffee or tea. I use only organic, because the worst thing you could do for your body is to put all those chemicals into your system. I used to not be able to drink coffee until I recognized that it was the glyphosates that's been sprayed all over coffee that was causing me stomach issues. So once I started drinking organic, I'm fine. And it's, you know, it's also a nootropic, so it's actually good for your brain. So that's what I have for breakfast.
So,
What do you have for breakfast?
egg whites, kale, and spinach and broccoli.
Sounds yummy.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I have. Egg whites, I don't eat the yolks.
Why not?
Too much cholesterol. I keep my cholesterol levels extremely low, extremely low. My HDL LDL ratio is below 1, and anything
Wow.
below 2.5, as you know, is considered top of the class. I just hit 0.8 last week,
Wow,
and
that's incredible.
so I'm pretty excited about that. That's the first time I've been that low.
It's
Then
incredible.
So then for lunch, I have cottage cheese and small fish, like maybe herring or sardines or kippers
Good
or
for
something
you.
like that.
Something high
And
in omega-3s.
yes, and something I started a couple of years ago, and I alluded to this earlier in the interview, and I want your opinion, please. 2 years ago, I started drinking half my weight in ounces of
I
water
never
every
answered
day.
that question, sorry.
Pardon? You never?
I
Yeah.
didn't realize I didn't answer that question,
No,
but
but
yeah.
that's my job to come back to it. So what do you think? You think
I think
half the
that's what
body
you
weight?
should be doing, yeah. If you have a water that has naturally electrolytes in it, like a Fiji water, for instance, or a Volvic, that's even better.
Well, I'm very lucky, Maddie. I only drink water that comes out of the ground next to my house.
Oh,
Uh, yeah, so I'm
yeah,
very
you
lucky
are
that
very
way.
lucky.
And by the way, I no longer drink water that comes in plastic bottles because we're getting evidence
Yeah,
that
the
some of that plastic,
microplastics.
some of the, you know that, some of the
I
plastic may
do.
be going into the water. And, you know, I interviewed Sylvia Earle. Do you know Sylvia
I
Earle?
don't know her.
Sylvia Earle is 87. She's the world's foremost oceanographer.
Oh, wow.
She has spent more time underwater than any human being. She has a patent on underwater submarines for scientists.
Wow.
And Sylvia on this program, she said to me, Richard, there's no place on the planet now that you can get a fish that does not have plastic in its stomach.
It's so awful. Yeah.
I know. And so that was sort of the end of my eating fish when she said that. And then recently,
So
you
what
may
are
have
left
read,
to eat?
pardon?
What's left to eat?
Well, for protein and meat, I'm presently eating bison because there's a bison ranch not far from where we live.
Well,
That's what I'm doing. And then the little fish, supposedly the fish, but I'm concerned about them because of what she said.
more.
It's getting difficult. We're in that transition stage as we're poisoning the planet, where it's going to get harder and harder to get clean food. Now, I want to move on to something else I want to ask you about.
Okay.
There was a recent study, a very credible study, large one, comparing over, I think, a period of 20 years, people who ate organic and people who ate non-organic. And I was one of those living in the Bay Area, as you do, who jumped on the organic bandwagon probably 50 years ago in the 70s, late 60s, early 70s. This study indicates no difference in health benefits to the people who ate organic and no difference in lifespan or other things. And I'm like scratching my head, like, oh my gosh, all this work and all this expense. But I'm still sticking with it because, from a common sense point of view, it seems eating without chemicals, eating with chemicals, if you can afford it, it's better to eat without chemicals. Where do you stand on this?
Okay, I am totally in the organic camp, and I spoke to a variety of doctors, including doctors at the Mayo Clinic, and who were involved in preventative medicine. And they said, so this is the challenge with the study that you talked about. And that is, they said 5 years ago, they wouldn't have recommended organic, just a waste of money, a waste of time, and you're putting yourself into a false narrative. However, today, that is really transformed because of the state of our planet and the use of glyphosates and other sprays, that insecticides that are used on a regular basis. Even those doctors who are very conservative, they said, yes, you need to eat organic. And if you feel like you can't afford it, buy flash frozen organic because it's cheaper than fresh. And honestly, it's even healthier. So, yes, I am in this camp of organic.
Flash frozen. And by the way, Costco has prices on organic, and I don't usually plug anybody, but I'm going to plug them because I was there recently, and their prices on organic were pretty darn reasonable. I mean, compared to regular food. Okay, back to women. Give us some more information for the women who are listening. Certainly those who may be in their 30s and want to start building habits now that'll help them remain healthy rather than dealing with various illnesses as they get older.
Okay, well, I could go in a variety of different directions, but when you're saying women in their 30s, 40s, and beyond, particularly 40s and beyond, we start to get some concern about going into perimenopause and menopause. And these are subjects that have been completely misunderstood, even by gynecologists, well-meaning gynecologists, I might add, because of that came out in the early 2000s, very large study that was put out by the Women's Health, I think it was Women's Health Organization. I'm not sure. I think it's Women's Health Organization, but it gave a lot of misinformation about hormone replacement. Now, it used to be the case that hormone replacement was very well accepted. But then there was this study that was done that was a very flawed study. And let me underline flawed study that be very heavily publicized. And it was taught in medical schools to gynecologists, which is unfortunate. So, how is it flawed? Well, for one thing, they used women over the age of 65 in the study who had never been on hormones before. And we have since learned that you don't want to start going on hormones after the age of 65. You want to start on your hormones early in the process of going through menopause. So that's point number one. Point number two, they were using artificial estrogen and progesterone. They were using they were using progesterone that was from pregnant horses. Kind of gross when you think about it. They don't, that is not what you ought to be doing anymore. Everyone seems to be in agreement that if you're to use hormone replacement, which most doctors who are well informed will suggest that you do, and I'll tell you why in just a minute, you need to use, first of all, for the estrogen, you want to use a patch. You want to use something that is not in pill form, that has an easy way of getting into your bloodstream. Second, you want to use a bioidentical progesterone. That's what, that is the gold standard of hormone replacement today. And you want to, I would suggest to each and every woman who's in their 40s and early 50s, find a menopause specialist. I mean, you can look them up online. These physicians are really in the know when it comes to menopause. And, hormone replacement, it's about way more than just getting rid of like the hot flashes and, the palpitations and not being able to sleep at night. Although those things are really important, it's really helps with your brain health, for instance. It makes a huge difference in your heart health. These are critical factors for most women. Now, if you have reproductive health cancers in your family, you need to go to the next level and talk to a menopause specialist. There are answers for you too.
That's important information.
Yeah,
Important
it's really,
information.
it's serious stuff. I know I've been doing hormone replacements since I'm 50 years old, and I still do it.
This isn't a question for you, but it's an example of how my mind works. When I wrote one of my recent books called Freeing Sexuality, one of the things that kept coming at me over and over again is how males have subjugated women for so many thousands of years in all kinds of areas. In this particular book, I was a focus on how males have subjugated women sexually, but also in the very language, like his history, his story, rather than her story. And I just had the thought as you were talking, here we're talking about a developmental stage of a woman's life, and we call it menopause.
That's very good. I like that.
I know. Why isn't it called womenopause? Okay, moving back. Some other
I'll tell you
things.
why. I think it's about menses going on pause.
I think so too, but it's an interesting thought.
No, it is. It's cute. I love it.
So, more information. Women are listening. They heard about exercise. They've now heard about estrogen and doing the patch, bioidentical. We've talked to them about hydration. A couple of more tips, a couple of more things they should be honing up on and getting habits into place.
Okay, sure. So one really simple one that we can all do, and that's really important, and that has to do with our attitudes towards aging. Now, that may sound crazy, but it doesn't cost a penny, and it's like flicking a switch in your brain. There have been longitudinal studies done in the Midwest that tell us, Becca Levy from Yale was the person who did the first studies, that by feeling and thinking and acting more positive about your own aging, that it could add up to 7.5 years to your life. And more recent studies tell us it's not just about lifespan, it's also about health span, that by in so doing, feeling more positive, which again doesn't cost a penny or doesn't have to cost a penny, that it can actually get rid of some of those aches and pains that you might be feeling from arthritis or, some kind of chronic degenerative diseases like diabetes or diabetes 2, not 1, but diabetes or heart disease or stroke. I mean, it can alleviate the causes of those things just by feeling more positive about aging. So I suggest we all take advantage of this great hack.
Maddie, not only does what you say not sound crazy, it sounds right on, because attitude doesn't come from the moon or from the sun or from the television set. Attitude comes from within us.
That's right.
I try to teach people to take a pause 5 or 6 times a day, perhaps, and go inside and decide what kind of attitude they're going to have, so that we each take responsibility for our attitude, and we get the attitude that we want rather than the attitude that somehow comes at us from who knows where. So I love what you're saying about developing a positive attitude about aging. I believe if we do what you're saying, we will be positive about it. It'll work. We just have to do it often enough, right?
That's right. Until it becomes a habit.
Exactly. And that's so important, listeners, for what Maddie and I are saying. Namely, that when we do something over and over and over again, it does become a habit.
That's
and
right.
if we decide what we're going to do, then it becomes a habit of our decision and our benefit. There are things we do over and over again which becomes habit that are dangerous.
Yeah.
We all know that. That's part of life also. But what you're advocating is a special attitude about aging. And I think that's wonderful. I'm all for it. And it's going to happen to all of us. Okay, that's another thing on the list. Develop your attitude about aging. Okay, what else?
Develop your positive attitude towards aging. Yeah, another thing to think about, and it's especially important for women, but it's important for men and women, and that is to zero in on your brain span or your brain health. We know that women are twice as likely to suffer from Alzheimer's disease as men. And I know it runs in my family, and it scares me to death. And as a result, I've gotten on the board of a couple nonprofits who are investing in research on Alzheimer's disease and how to find a cure. And we're not there yet.
No.
But so sorry. I thought I turned it off. Sorry.
Is that?
It is. I'm sorry.
Wow, that's quite a ring you got on there. That'll get your attention.
I know. So sorry. I apologize for that.
I don't mind.
Okay, good. Thank you. So anyway, brain health is super important. By the way, we talked about exercise before. Exercise can actually increase the size of our hippocampus, which is where we store memories. So great thing to be doing. Drinking alcohol is one of the absolute worst things we can do for our brain health, because we have learned over the last several years that there are steps we can, each and every one of us, take to increase our brain span. And we want to do that. We want to, the worst thing that I can even imagine is losing our capacity to remember things, to articulate our feelings and our thoughts. We want to protect our brains. Health does not stop at the neck.
What were you saying?
Health is not.
No, I'm kidding. That was a joke.
Oh, okay. Didn't get it.
You mentioned alcohol, and alcohol is one of the elephants in the room.
It is.
Because it really is, because there is so much scientific evidence now that alcohol is toxic to human beings.
That's right.
And yet it is so deeply embedded for thousands of years in our consciousness. The marketing plan for alcohol is incredible. And so it's really a tough one because we have alcohol connected to celebration.
Yes.
We have it, and that's so important. We have it embedded in partying and having a good time. It has so many positive aspects that have been attributed to it. And at the same time, you and I know, and so many of our colleagues know, it's toxic.
It is.
It's just toxic. We got
It
a
actually,
problem.
yeah, it kills brain cells. There's no doubt about it. However, one of the experts I spoke to, just to put it for a couple things. First, if you talk to a lot of kids who are part of the Gen Z generation, many of them don't drink alcohol at all.
Right.
No, it is a trend that's taking place. And I know from going out to dinner with friends that there's a lot of mocktails that are now available more readily than ever before. And it makes it a little bit easier to drink less or not at all. So that's good news. But I spoke to a French researcher who was very focused, a neuroscientist, focused on Alzheimer's disease. And she said, in France, we really treasure the idea of joy, of bringing joy into our lives. And if having a glass of wine with dinner can bring you joy, it sort of counteracts some of the negative impact. But she's talking about 1 5-ounce glass of wine, not, guzzling a bunch of alcohol.
Well, I have a little saying in my life, Maddie, and that is a little something over a long period of time is a lot of something.
Yes.
And so, for example,
yeah, that's true.
One soft drink that's 150 calories over 3 years, and you gain 45 pounds. I've done the math. And so I'm here to say that 5 ounces of wine a night comes to 1,800 ounces a year, and 1,800 ounces to metabolize is a lot of dead brain tissue.
Yes.
And I know, ever since we were kids, the French have always made a thing about their wine with lunch, and they always have good rationalizations for it. But you still have to deal with what you quoted.
Yeah.
It kills it. So how many brain tissues do you want to give up for that little bit of joy? I guess each of us has to make that decision.
That's right. That's right. And it used to be thought, oh, you want to drink a glass of wine because it has resveratrol in it, but which is considered a nootropic. However, it's been shown that you'd have to drink like 60 glasses of wine to get any benefit from resveratrol.
That's right. That's right. That's right. But it really is something when you take the 5 ounces and multiply it out.
Yeah,
and you
I
end
had
up,
never thought of it that way. That's super interesting. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, 1,800 ounces comes to about 50 cases of 50 bottles of 50 bottles of wine. It's a lot to metabolize.
That is a lot to metabolize.
So here's something I like to do in the program. I like to take a pause and let my guests take a pause. And you think about what else you'd like to share with the listeners that's important that you haven't covered. So if you would please take a pause and think about it, and I'm going to give a little commercial about the program while you're pausing.
Okay.
And then we're going to come back and I'm going to say, what else would you like to add to what we've talked about so far? Okay?
Okay.
All right, gentle listeners, I want to remind you that we broadcast a new program every week, Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock. I'm aware of the fact that most of you don't listen at Tuesday morning at 9. You like to go to the archives. I want to remind you that our archives for 20 years are open source. That means totally free. You can listen to the most brilliant people like Maddy Dychtwald on our archives without any charge to you. Just go to mindbodyhealthpolitics.org. What else? No, nothing else. Back to Maddie. Did you think of something you might want to add?
Oh, there's like so many things, because I feel like there's a lot of confusion out there and a lot of misinformation, especially in today's world. And let's just talk for a minute about the healthcare system. We talk about inequity. There's so much inequity. I mean, especially in terms of socioeconomics, no doubt about it. But, we have a healthcare system that was put into place primarily by men, for men. And we even call women's health something that's off to the side as reproductive health. So we don't even think of the whole body. We just think of the reproductive health. So that's something that we need to be well aware of, and we need to, as women, protect ourselves against. Just as an example, using pharmaceutical products as the example, it wasn't until 2016, that wasn't very long ago, that the FDA told pharma companies that they ought to, not that they have to, but they ought to include women in their clinical trials. So before then, chances are women weren't even included in the clinical trials on most medicines. So what does that mean? Well, I'll give you an example in my life. So have you heard of metformin?
Of course.
Yeah. Okay. So everybody, all the biohackers are taking metformin. So I went to my doctor and I said, I want to take metformin. And my doctor said, well, are you sure? I mean, if you really want to, sure, I'll write you a prescription, but you need to get a lot of blood tests done because it hasn't been tested on women. And my doctor knew that, which is better than most doctors. And so I tried it for a week, and within a week, I was having such bad digestive issues that I had to stop taking it. And it took several weeks for my digestive system to go back on track. So that's one example of the kind of negative impact that not testing drugs on women can actually bring about. Add to that the fact that as people get older, many are taking multiple drugs at one time, and polypharmacy is just, it's unexplored territory.
I every time I meet a woman as a patient of mine, and I ask how many doctors, and as soon as I hear more than one doctor, I immediately get like my antennas start waving.
Yeah.
I've run into so many situations, particularly with women, where they'll have several doctors, all of them prescribing, and the doctors aren't talking to each other.
Crazy.
So none of them realize that the other doctors are prescribing, and the woman might be on 6 different medicines. You're familiar with this routine.
Yeah, I am. And I actually think that AI and the development of AI will help alleviate this negative situation. But until that happens, I mean, it's not a good situation at all.
In your talks, one of the things that you've talked about that I'd like you to talk about today a bit is something you call intergenerational communes.
Community,
Now, naturally, I'm interested in that because you heard me in the beginning talk about how I believe that we're tribal animals.
I totally agree. I think that, the most recent science, we used to just think it was, oh, it's really nice to have friends or not. But what we have been learning and what has been scientifically proven is that social connections is a viable part of this holistic recipe for ageless aging. I mean, the science points directly to the fact that low social interaction is the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Now,
Wow.
that's crazy. And, you think, oh my God, okay, so now I have to add that into my thing. I have to have like 20 friends that I communicate with all the time. Well, that's not the way it works. When I spoke with experts, they told me, well, if you have 3 to 4 close in relationships, people who you can count on if there's an emergency, people who you trust, and people who you can confide in, that you're doing great. And that you need some looser connections also. That could be, oh, you're going to Starbucks to get a coffee, talk to the barista, get on a first name basis with that barista. One of the experts I spoke to, she told me that she lived in New York City. She was a professor at Columbia University. And psychiatrist, and she told me that she was disgusted with how dirty and disgusting it was in front of her townhouse on the Upper West Side. And so she started going out and collecting garbage like on Saturday mornings. And would run into people and started talking to them, and they started joining her cleaning up in front of their adjacent homes, so that this concept started spreading through the neighborhood, and everybody would go out to breakfast afterwards, and they started planting a garden together, and they just created a community, and community is what we're talking about.
We are. Do you recommend that women familiarize themselves with the 9 principles of the blue zones?
Well, okay, I know Dan Buettner, and I think a lot of what he talks about makes so much sense. It's incredible. I mean, it's what we're alluding to for sure, and trying to say this in a way that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, yes, I would suggest that those are things that really matter. You know, eating real food, moving your body on a regular basis, community, having a sense of purpose. These are the things we talk about. I think it goes further than that, but I think those things are the underpinnings of living better longer. And, you know, my emphasis has always been on increasing health span and brain span more than increasing lifespan.
I mentioned Dan's work, the Blue Zones, because you mentioned the importance of
I
community,
too, yeah.
And of course that's one of the things that he discovered, that there were people who were sitting around and having coffee together who had been doing it for 90 years.
That's right.
They knew, right, for all that time, and he concluded that the social interaction, and now you're validating it as well, that social interaction contributes greatly to, let's say, graceful longevity rather than incompetent longevity, right?
Well, I think that it nourishes you. And I think
Yeah.
that that kind of nourishment is as important as what we put in our mouths to eat.
What's longevity insurance, Maddie?
Well, there's a variety of different ways of looking at that, but I personally think that longevity insurance is to recognize the fact that you have agency over your health and well-being, and that it comes in many forms. It's, you know, the food that you eat and don't eat. It's the movement that you do in your everyday life. It's building community. It's understanding the fact that our bodies are sacred and are well connected to our minds, and that we need to not just respect, but feed them the most positive attitudes and expectations that we could even dream of. So those are just a few of the things. I mean, I think the prescription for longevity, or as you said, the longevity insurance, it's it's like in it's the way we live our lives, and we choose to live our lives, and that there's choices that we make every day in every way that can make us either stronger or help us move in a more negative direction. So, you know, the choice is ours.
Mm-hmm. What about this thing that's called retirement? Is retirement this concept that's been sold to us? Is retirement a good thing for health? I mean, when I was in graduate school 100 years ago, they taught us that a very significant percentage of people start dying as soon as they retire
Yeah.
because they lose meaning and purpose and a sense of engagement. And that's, you know, I'm still working 3 jobs, part of it because I bought into that. And part of it is because I love my work. I don't see any reason to stop doing something I love. You got to do something. But what are your thoughts about this whole concept of retirement?
Yeah, I have ambivalent thoughts about it. I like you, I'm 74 and I'm still working full time, love my work, but I am passionate about my work, and not everyone is passionate about their work.
Yeah.
So There's a lot of people who are working because they have to, not because they want to. And those are the people, according to studies we've done at AgeWave, who really are the ones more than likely wanting to take early retirement, and they don't want to work anymore. But there's this whole other segment of the population that may want to stop working in the career that they've been in, and they want to kind of reinvent themselves. And maybe it's working for money, which I think is probably a good idea and for a variety of reasons. Or it could be volunteering your time to, you know, get involved in a cause that really matters to you. That's really a cool way of going also, but you want to have that sense of purpose and meaning. And, you know, one of the experts I spoke with, who is an expert on the social side of aging, Mark Friedman, he told me that there's purpose with a big P and purpose with a little p. And by the way, they both can have a great impact on your health and well-being, just like you learned when you were in medical school. So purpose with a big P, that's like, oh, I want to work. I want to have a super meaningful career, or I want to reinvent myself, or I want to start a nonprofit. These are like big P's, but little P's matter too. I mean, I want to spend more time with my grandchildren. I want to get up in the morning and walk my dog. I mean, those things actually contribute to our health and well-being as well. So, it's a mixed bag. I mean, retirement, I don't think everyone should retire, but if you really don't like what you're doing and you don't have a financial issue that would keep you working, and you can live on a fixed income, and you have social relations that you don't rely on work for, sure, retire.
Should we be encouraging those people who didn't particularly like their work, who looked forward to retiring? Should we be encouraging them to see if they can find other work that they do like? They'll be in more of a choice place because they have some retirement money and they're able to retire. But should we be encouraging them to find other work because of the value of doing something, of engagement?
Yeah. Well, from a study that we've done at AgeWave, uh, a recent study, we found that the majority of retirees say that it's important to feel useful in retirement, and that feeling useful can actually help us feel more useful. So,
Yes.
I think that that's a real legitimate
Yes.
thing.
I mentioned before that 72% of the country. Are we running out of time? I'm getting a signal here from Charlie. Maybe
Yeah,
we're running out.
we are.
Well, do you have, Charlie, do we have time for one more question or should we wrap it up? Okay, well, I can save my next question for next time if there'll be a
Sure.
next time.
Absolutely.
Fair enough. Maddy Dychtwald, thank you so much for being with us today on Mind, Body, Health, and Politics. It's been quite educational.
Thank you, and I appreciate you having me as a guest.
And thank you, gentle listeners, for being with us today on Mind, Body, Health, and Politics. I remind you that we'll come out with a new show every week, and you'll be able to hear Maddie's program in about 2 weeks. You'll be getting a newsletter announcing her program. So until next time, this is Dr. Richard Lewis Miller reminding you that good health is worth fighting for, and it's essential for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's a